I'm Michael. Welcome to Beyond the Screenplay's What We're Watching, our podcast where we watch a television series week by week. Today we're talking about The Last of Us, created by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, specifically Season 2, Episode 3, titled The Path, available on HBO Max. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
All right, so we had a big shocker in the last episode. This episode felt like a little bit of reset and kind of setting the stage for what is to come, clarifying some arcs and desires for our characters. And it got us to Seattle, which I'm really happy about. There was a period during this episode where I was a little bit worried it was just going to be like an hour of setup and things weren't going to like move forward at all, and that would be a following episode. But this episode gets Ellie and Dina to Seattle after setting up their revenge arc. I want to talk about how the show is setting up the revenge arc and trying to get us invested in it in different ways of trying to get people to buy into it. And it also teases some other groups in Seattle. It opens, if I remember correctly, on this group of people. I guess it doesn't open it, but we see this group of people early on moving through the woods. We learn a little bit about them, and we kind of bookend with then seeing the aftermath of whatever they were afraid of at the beginning of the episode, with them being all dead, which is also, again, going toward trying to get us on board with this revenge kick. So it was an interesting episode, and I want to hear what you guys think and made of it, because it's kind of the first, for me anyway, the gate of unknown was opened after Joel was killed, and I was like, I don't know what they're going to do exactly after that, and this is the first step through that gate. So it was interesting. Alex, what did you make of this episode?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of nice, I guess, one, to have a breather, because Game of Thrones used to do this a lot. You would have kind of the big battle episode where something crazy happens, and there's kind of like the final episode of the season actually isn't the biggest episode of the season. It's kind of like a reset, game board reset, get ready for the future episode. And it's kind of like this was doing that, but near the beginning of the season instead of at the end of the season. The thing that I was feeling was it was tough to follow the first two episodes of this season, because the first episode was another game board reset episode, essentially, jumping us into the future and setting up all these new character dramas with Joel and Ellie and the therapist and the town. And I was really excited about all those story threads. And then, of course, episode 2 shockingly kind of cuts off the Joel story threads, and then also kind of resets the town again as well with the zombie apocalypse battle scene. So it was kind of like, it was like another reset shortly after a reset. And this was like a less interesting reset for me. And so, yeah, it was a little bit bumpy in that way just because of what had come before. And I feel like I was more excited about what was to come in the first two episodes, and right now it's kind of like things are still wide open. We did get to Seattle, but we didn't really get to Seattle. Like, we don't know any of the characters there yet. We can see the city and we see hints of these two factions in Seattle, but I'm not invested in Seattle yet. And so I'm kind of in this limbo right now of, the first episode got me real invested in Jackson. That's all behind us now. And we're to Seattle, but I'm not invested in Seattle yet either. And so I'm not really invested in anything, except for, I mean, it is fun to watch Ellie and Dina and their little kind of will they, won't they? But I don't know. It's just the first season, it benefits from that classic hero's journey of, like, get the girl to the place, cure, save the world. And this season has to deal with this more kind of ambiguous revenge, new factions, new places thing, and I'm not quite there yet. So I'm excited to see the next episode and see if Seattle can really hook me with the dramas that are happening there. Right now I'm a little bit untethered.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm feeling the same way, and also why I'm looking forward to the next episode, because I feel like that's going to be a little bit make or break for this season,
Right.
I think. Brian, how are you feeling?
Good, yeah. Like you said, I was a little worried this was going to be just a Jackson only episode, and we were just maybe it was going to like end with them leaving. So I am glad that we were able to spend time kind of grieving, you know, the watch, the give Sarah my love, Ellie freaking out at the hospital, like all of that. By the way, my what was changed from the game. Part of my brain is off this episode because almost everything was brand new. So it was just like great,
cool.
you know. So the coming back to the watch and the give Sarah my love and all that, like that was all for the show, and it was all beautifully done. And then Ellie like lying to everybody and then crying, and then but then yeah, I'm glad we spent time there. And then I'm glad that we did leave, and I didn't need us to get all the way to Seattle. That felt like it happened like really fast to me. But at the same time, I'm happy that now next episode we're there and we're ready to go, as opposed to an episode of like traveling and getting there and everything. Like this show does move things forward, you know, quite a bit, as we talked about in the previous couple episodes. And yeah, I think the only thing, and this is a little bit what you were saying, Alex, about the hooking of it, I kind of wanted a little more grief, and then I wanted a little more revenge. Like I wanted to be like, we gotta go. Another thing that's changed from the game is it's not 3 months later that Ellie leaves. It's like 3 days later. Like she gets her stuff together. She goes. Like she is like, I'm gonna go kill everyone, right? So, and this has this little like John Wick comes home and then like watches TV for 3 months and then like, you know what, maybe now I'll go get those guys, you know? And obviously like Ellie's in the hospital, she doesn't have a choice and and then also she is clearly, as is made very clear by Gail, hiding exactly how she's feeling from the other characters and from us. But even from Dina. So it's like, even when she and Dina are together, there's not the sense of like, all right, good, we're out of there now. So I think there is a little sense of, we don't get that like fire, that like, I gotta go, I gotta get these guys, whatever, right? Which I kind of wanted to give me a hook for the rest of the season. At the same time, I do think it's an interesting choice to kind of have Ellie not be fully clear about her feelings and her intentions yet, and I think that will be revealed to us and those around her as we go. So I'm excited. It's like I'm going to withhold judgment on that until I see how it actually affects the season as a whole.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, Trisha, what about you? What are you thinking as you're watching this episode?
Yeah, I have a lot of the same thoughts as you guys. I think structurally, I do feel a little unmoored because I knew pretty early on in the last season that season of television was like gonna be a road movie, essentially, where I was like, okay, great, take this to there, and then along the way, each episode is gonna have its own little mini arc. It's gonna be this episode where we're gonna encounter these people, and then we're gonna encounter these people, and then we're gonna encounter these people, and the secondary and tertiary characters are essentially gonna enter for this episode, and then depart shortly thereafter. So there was sort of this like familiar rhythm that I was able to get into even before like they set off in the first season, just because the goal was so clear, the trajectory was so strong. I had a real understanding of like what I'm watching, just in terms of like genre, structure, everything. This, I'm not quite sure what I'm watching. Like, I think that there are unresolved plot threads in Jackson, and yet we've left there. Like, I think,
well, they've left there. We haven't necessarily left there.
correct.
True. I think,
and
yeah.
so, and that's an excellent point. But again, then I'm like, okay, the protagonist has departed. I'm not clear also that Ellie is now my actual true protagonist in this season. I think she is. But as you were pointing out there, just Brian, like there's a POV thing happening where I'm not really privy much to her private thoughts. I'm sort of looking at her from the outside. Apart from the one beautiful scene where she's in the closet, right, where she finds all the stuff and she's crying and just walking into the house, doing that entire like grief like processing thing upon arriving home, and Joel is gone. And I really love that sequence. But the rest of the time that we're with her in this episode, we're with other people looking at her and trying to gauge what she's going through, what she actually means.
Right.
I think thematically, the episode raises some really interesting new points about what the season is potentially going to actually revolve around and be about, and how it's going to expand on some of the themes from the first season, which I'm really interested in. And I think the POV is doing something deliberate. So, you know, in the scene with Tommy and Gail, where they're sitting watching the baseball game, Gail raises this sort of point about Ellie's a liar and she's lying, and some people can't be saved. And then we also, on the other side, have this seemingly really heartfelt speech by Ellie about justice. Like, she says it with her words. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice. It's for us. And Gail says she's lying. Some of the townspeople believe her. Knowing what I know about her, I'm skeptical. But we're not shown the truth about that aspect of it. We know that she's stubborn. We know that she's going to go after Joel's killers no matter what. But what her real motivations are, you know, is it 100% revenge? Like, Gail suggests that, Gail and Tommy suggest that Joel's violence, Joel's inner violence, was not really about ideals or ethics or morals. It was just about him satisfying his own desire for violence, and that he would make justifications for himself about why he was able to enact this violence and why it was okay. And Gail suggests that Ellie is the same way. But I do think it's very purposefully raising the question whether that's true or not, whether Ellie can choose a different way or could go a different way than Joel does. And I think that's all really interesting. And so I think the POV is keeping us at arm's length away from her to an extent. That being said, again, structurally, I don't know where that leaves me. Mm-hmm. And pacing, I also don't really know where that leaves me. I don't know. Like, we have to get back to those forest cult people. But like, I was just like, oh, so these are my people for the episode. I'm in a road movie again now. Here's the weird religious cult we're going to meet. I wonder how the encounter with Ellie and Dina and them is going to go, like what their whole deal is. And then they're gone now. Can't wait to talk about more about them. But again, just like it just kind of kept me guessing. And I wasn't expecting to get to Seattle so soon. And now we're here. And oh, look, the wolves are really well organized and really well armed. Okay. So yeah, I don't exactly know what the season big picture is going to be, how it's going to be structured, and what it's being structured around either, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just really quick to comment on that ending. It was an interesting ending where it was both like dun dun dun, look how well organized they are, but I didn't know what that really told me besides just like Ellie and Dina are screwed, or like what are they even gonna do? So it was both like a big like reveal, but also not a specific enough reveal for me to be like, oh man, I can't wait for next week, because I kind of am just like, okay, they have an army. Shoot.
It is more just juxtaposed, obviously, against them being like, I don't know how many there are. Maybe there aren't that many. Well, there's about to be a whole lot less. LOL, like, which was like weirdly light and fluffy about like, let's go kill some people. And then obviously the reveal of like, no, it's not gonna be that simple.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to say one quick thing too, Trisha, because you mentioned the scene in Joel's house. That is maybe the only full scene that is straight from the game.
Oh, nice.
And we've talked about how these games are really good at establishing empathy through gameplay. And in that section of the game, Joel's grave is actually like in the middle of town, so not far from his house. And you start there and you walk to the house, and all you can do is walk. Like your sprint mechanics, you can't like punch or draw or anything like that. All you can do is just walk slowly into the house, walk up the stairs. And then when you click on like the box or the the jacket, then it sort of turns into cinematic mode, so you can see that beautiful performance that Bella Ramsey also gives here. That's given in the game as well, and it's just like I just found it really affecting when I was playing. That like I felt like this feeling of like slow molassesy kind of gameplay was exactly what I needed to feel what Ellie was feeling at that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the record, I like the time jump. I think they did have to do some logistical work, like expository work, to make it make sense, right? Like Dina comes in and she's like, if I had told you in the hospital, you would have yanked out all your tubes and set off immediately, which is probably how it goes in the game, or how it would go in a more conventional version of this. But I like that they kind of slowed that down and let her process, let Jackson process, and then gave us the scene in the town hall and all that stuff, which we can come back to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as we've identified here, the engine of the show is changing. And I can't even really think of other shows that have done this, but like you were saying, Trish, the first season is a road movie. It has a clear trajectory. We often reference Apocalypse Now when we're talking about this kind of story.
Yep.
Of the story of Apocalypse Now is just go up the river to get to the thing. And then along the way, all these things are going to happen, and it's wrapped in this context, but it gives you this intrinsic trajectory and sense of pacing, because you know, as the audience, we need to get closer to that thing, and I can track moment by moment, beat by beat, episode by episode. Are we getting closer or not? And also part of the engine of The Last of Us Season 1 is Ellie and Joel and their relationship, and Joel being our protagonist. And so there's just like a whole lot of retooling of the engine of the show that has to happen, which is Joel is gone. We have Ellie and Dina, and I think, you know, Joel dying is a powerful kind of ghost, to use the kind of the writing term. You know, an example of the ghost is season 1, classic ghost. We would see Sarah, Joel's daughter, die. That's the sort of thing in his past that motivates all of his fears, his arc, etc. And so now we have Joel dying, and that is the motivation for Ellie's arc and her obsession. But as we're also saying, she is kept a little like distant from us. And so there is just a lot of like retooling that has to happen. And I think given that, this was a pretty graceful handling of something that could be extremely clunky. But as we're saying, I do think it's going to be the next episode that really lets us know, like, have you successfully rebuilt the engine, and are we moving forward now? Or are we in a clunker for the rest of the season?
Yikes. Yeah, because even thinking about, you know, Joel and Ellie, there's a nice contrast there. Even just physically, there's a contrast in that pairing, and also just in their attitudes and their histories. And there's a part of the fun of watching a road movie with a pair is that they're usually opposites, or they can't stand each other, or they got to learn
Built-in conflict.
Yeah,
Right.
built-in conflict. And with Ellie and Dina, you know, they're like you're pointing out, Brian, they're kind of lighthearted right now. You know, they're pretty chill about their revenge journey, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of conflict besides the more kind of like high school, like, do you like me, do you not like me? And so I do think that if they are going to become the new Joel and Ellie kind of pairing that needs to power the season, something's got to develop with them that makes for more drama. Because if they stay in this kind of chill mode, which I doubt they will, because they're about to run into a lot of drama, I think this is not enough to give us that engine that Joel and Ellie had.
Well, yeah, and again, just in terms of pacing, like, you're right that the interpersonal conflict is not there. And so there's a reason why that pairing can't sustain a road movie's worth of a season. And so we're in Seattle now. And so, like,
Right.
there's something else. And there's going to be other people, right? I was actually expecting to see more of Tommy and more of Jesse. And maybe we still will. Again, I'm not sure how the POV is going to play out. But it's very clear that this relationship is too harmonious for a drama. Even with the romantic undercurrent to it, it's just going to become secondary to whatever the big thing is that looms ahead.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier, I think it's interesting how this show or how this episode tried to establish Ellie's revenge obsession goal, and I appreciated that they tried to make it more palatable to people like me. Alex, I think you as well have talked about not really into revenge stories. Like, I can just quickly be like, no, you shouldn't do that, actually. More pain is more pain. Like,
Right.
next question.
You're like that guy Carlisle or whoever that is that's like, no, this is really easy, actually. We don't do that.
Right.
But yeah, and so I think they do a decently effective job at finding other ways to buy in. But also, to your point earlier, Brian, I don't get the unbridled, passionate need from Ellie in this. And so she does have that speech to the whole community, which again is not in the game. We get to see other people resonating with it or disagreeing with it. Her argument, even though I agree I don't really believe she believes those things, is interesting. Like, it's something you can understand of, like, we're doing this for the community to know that what happens to you will be answered. We have each other's backs. Like, there are ways of getting into this and buying into it besides just revenge. And even once they get to Seattle and we see that the group of religious people have been murdered, like, brutally, like another father and daughter, right, are dead, that they're assuming those are the Abbey people, the wolves did this. And so it's like, oh well, just justice for, like, cosmic justice means we have to kill the people that would do this. So I feel like this show is doing a lot of work to try to get us on board with it intellectually, which I appreciated. But as I said, the passionate drive was missing for me.
And it's interesting because I feel like if it's a tricky balance, because on the one hand, perhaps there's a risk of Ellie becoming just like tiresome if the whole episode she's just brooding and angry and raging, and if there's no like love or life left there, then it's like, then we kind of detach in a different way. But I agree that we talk often about how movies, drama, any fiction, good narrative is driven by a main character who really, really wants something and is going after that thing with everything they've got, and they hit obstacles along the way. And I think, yeah, we are told in this episode a lot that Ellie really wants to get revenge, but I didn't feel it in the guttural way that you guys are talking about. And I think if Ellie was in a bit more of a outwardly kind of screwed up, rage driven, passionate place where she's in so much pain, and the only way she can think to like eliminate the pain is to do this revenge thing, then Dina, in her kind of like flirting and teasing with Ellie, there could be a little bit more tension there of Dina's trying to like save Ellie or kind of like keep the Ellie that she knows, and Ellie is like maybe getting lost. That all could be in the future. As you said, Brian, we're judging now what maybe is going to come. But yeah, if Ellie was a bit darker, then Dina could be that light that is kind of trying to pull her back. And right now, there's not enough contrast between Dina's light and her dark.
Yeah, that was my feeling too. I like sort of just wish that maybe in the scene where they're talking in the tent, which I love the dialogue and I think it's all really well done and well performed by the actors, but I was like, what does Dina think about all of this? Early on she says, I loved him too. And like, obviously I will go with you like anywhere, right? Like, you could have just asked me, Ellie. Later on when she's there dressing down Ellie's preparation. But I do wonder, like, I don't know. I feel like I need a little bit more from who Dina is. Like, what does she think about this? Has she ever personally lost someone? Did she ever go down this path? Like, has she thought about revenge for Joel and what it would feel like? she was there. What does she think about these people? Do they really deserve a terrible, violent death in the way that they did to Joel? Like, there's just so many questions that so much context I don't have for Dina that could even be hinted at, right? It doesn't need to be like a big monologue or something. It could just be sketched in dialogue or even in visual storytelling. Like, if you had staged the scene the other way, where Ellie's getting ready to go. She's almost ready to go. And then she's like, screw it. I'm going to ask Dina if she wants to come. She could go to Dina's house. She could visit Dina and say, like, here, I've got all my stuff. Like, I've got the horse. I'm ready to go. And then we could see where Dina lives. We could see what Dina's life is like, what her world is like. What does she have to lose? What does she care about? Who is she? Like, all I know is that she has an on again, off again thing with Jesse. End of list. Like, that's all I really know about Dina in this instance. And you guys have said before that she's not as much of a character in the game. I think it's cool. She's a real character. She's right now the secondary protagonist of this season. Make her a real character. Give me a little bit more what her angle is on the theme. And so even if she's like, yeah, I'm with you, Ellie, I want to know exactly why. Is she there because Ellie is her best friend and she loved Joel? Is she as hellbent driven on revenge? Exactly the questions you have, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is she really doing here? She's going to risk her own life to do this. Why? I think there needs to be a stated reason, even if it's BS. Like, there needs to be a stated reason, and then under pressure, we find out the truth. But I just wish I actually knew what it was.
Yeah. To be clear, it wasn't that we said that Dina's not as much of a character in the game. It was that she doesn't have really any scenes with Joel.
Interesting. Okay.
But she is in the game quite a bit.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But this is a bit of a different Dina, and this is a bit of a different relationship. I do recommend, by the way, the Last of Us podcast that they put out every week. It's Troy Baker, who played Joel in the game, interviewing Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, and it's like an hour long of them just like talking about every scene and breaking it down and stuff.
Cool.
Generally spoiler free. Occasionally Craig will be a little excited about being like, this thing happened, what does that mean? Maybe we'll find out soon, It's just like, relax. But he does talk about some of those things, and he talked briefly about Dina being sort of manipulative in the tent and kind of like, what do you think about this? Why do you think that? And just kind of like, it's like she's like playing with Ellie in a weird way. So this all feels like new to me in terms of like who game Dina is in my brain. And I do think I kind of am expecting next episode to be the sort of second half of this of what this episode was setting up in terms of just like I think we will spend more time with Ellie and Dina and hopefully just have like some really like deep, long conversational kind of moments and stuff and kind of get a lot of the answer. Like I'm wondering, I want to come back to this conversation next week and be like, do we now feel like all those questions we had in this episode feel like they were properly answered? At least not all of them, but at least to a satisfying degree next episode.
100%. Brian, I agree. I really want to talk about Dina. Dina, like video game Dina, does feel, from what we've seen of show Dina, very different. And video game Dina is one of my favorite characters ever. But I do think it's too early like to judge. And I think it's interesting, as you said at the beginning of this episode, Brian, like most of this was new. And so there is a sense that I'm having of like, I really don't, like I've experienced this other text that is a video game that is a similar story, but I really don't know exactly what's going to happen or when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen because of these changes. And I think it's interesting. But I do think we're sort of, as we're talking, there's this like list of unanswered questions that I think next episode hopefully will go some distance to answering. And I think we should revisit them next episode. And it'll be really interesting.
And one of the things I'm most curious about is those cult people that we saw. I have no idea if they're in the game. I have no idea what we'll learn about them, if anything. It feels though like just coming from a screenwriter's perspective, the scene that we saw with them is pointing so much at like all of their random stuff, where it's like, it's actually, if you were just wanted to show a bunch of characters, innocent characters who get slaughtered along the side of the road, there is no need to spend a 4-minute, 5-minute scene with them where somebody's walking, they've got their bow and arrows, they've got their scars on their cheeks, here's the symbol on their back. And then like everyone's walking there. Why are we going here? Well, I told you we need to get to a safer place. Why can't she protect us? You mean the prophet? It's just like, it's very dialogue-y dialogue that's doing expository something, which is why I was so convinced that Ellie and Dina are going to run into these people and we're going to like get a window into their whole thing, whatever it is. And it reminded me of the cannibal cult in the last season.
I've been instructed by legal not to respond to any of your...
No, I know. That's... I'm telling you what it's like to watch this as an audience member
really
with a screenwriting background.
Right.
Where I'm just like, okay, now we have hammers? Now
I want a hammer, Dad.
Here's a little one.
So many questions there. Well, it's just like a big setup, and then the payoff is not nothing. The payoff is just enough something to make me feel like it's not the payoff, where they like kick over the first guy. Who's he? What's the symbol? I've never seen it before. Like, what is it? Let's point at it a little bit here in the dialogue. And then, yeah, everyone has been slaughtered. Exactly how?
Must have been Abby. That was a little thanks, Obama. That like,
That was so much. I was like, I'm going to guess it wasn't
like
Abby.
someone took all the jelly beans from the store. It must have been Abby.
That was truly wild. But also, you know, when he says, she's like, who is it? He's like, oh, it's wolves. And then they're like, these are wolves. Come on now. But anyway, all of this to say, it feels very written. And in a way that makes me feel like I haven't seen the last of any of these people or any of these things that I've been told to pay attention to. So
it is interesting how even in this episode, there is a little fake out where we're with them. They hear someone's coming, danger is coming, go and hide. And we don't see who or what. And then later, as we're approaching with Dina and Ellie, my brain was like, oh, Dina and Ellie are the people that they're hiding from. And so then they do the little switch of like, oh no, they're all dead already. I thought that was an interesting kind of, little subversion of expectations to be repurposed elsewise.
Which I liked, but I will also say, again, in terms of pacing, as we were getting closer and closer to that, in fact, as we were in that scene in the tent, I was like half in the scene in the tent, which I was compelled by. And I was also half going, we're running out of time to meet this cult. Like, I was like checking my watch. I was like, we're not going to meet them in this episode at all, I guess. And then suddenly they were all dead. So congrats, I guess, on pulling the rug out from under me. But I guess I'll see what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just one last thought about the use of the cult in this episode. I wonder if the episode could have benefited from having more of like a C plot, with the cult that we're cutting away to, because since there is, there's not a huge amount happening with Ellie and Dina. Like there is the setting off in the journey and the town council, but it's not a hugely dramatic episode. If we had a cutaway to what lies ahead in Seattle, that could even be providing some context for, oh, this is, when they're leaving the gates and Seth is trading guns with them. And it's like, we are getting a little taste of they're heading into some like weird stuff in Seattle. That may have been added some additional kind of subtext and drama to the leaving of the safety of Jackson.
Speaking of character consistency, Seth, what?
Oh, you didn't like that? I thought that was actually kind of a cool choice to kind of be like, they are now in an alliance, which is maybe a kind of a black mark against Ellie's direction, which is like this guy who was set up as kind of backwards and a bigot in the first episode is now the sole voice who is like, hell yeah, revenge.
I like that, but again, I would like some kind of textual justification for why that is. And he kind of says it.
I feel like I know people like Seth and would expect them to want to go chase people with guns. Is like the text for me. The textual thing is just like I live in America.
Even if it was just like, when I first came to Jackson, Joel was the only person who would say hi to me. Just literally anything, like just some kind of background.
Right.
Like, did anybody ever talk to Seth ever before he walked into this scene? That's hard to know.
They did have the apology scene at the lunch counter or whatever.
No, and I did like that too.
Yeah. The game, just for context, the game is those two scenes, the dance scene and the apology scene, and that's it. That's all we ever know of
fascinating.
Seth. So I really liked him being the very unlikely ally, to be like, of course he's going to be the one who is the most grisly when it comes to like, don't just take it lying down, like let's go get this guy or whatever. And then to have Ellie like still be very hesitant to shake his hand at the end, because she's like, we're not buddies, but at the same time, if our goals are aligned right now, then okay, let's work together for this amount of time.
And Michael, you were kind of pointing out the episode is going to some lengths to, I don't know, kind of give us a thematic dialogue to, putting in the text the thematic spectrum about revenge and about what is right and justice and all that. So we have Ellie's speech about justice. We have the other guy who speaks up at the town hall and saying, revenge is not going to get you anywhere. We're going to show mercy. We're different because we show mercy. And so I think, having Seth as part of that like spectrum that's being voiced, or the kind of the thematic debate, it was nice to have that triad of voices in the town hall.
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah. I think this episode's doing a lot of setting up and like we've said, rebuilding a new engine, and I think we'll know a lot more from the next episode. I am excited about that. And just to say it really quick, you said at the beginning, Trisha, that the psychologist, I forget her name.
Gail.
Thank you, Gail. Says this thing of like, some people just can't be saved, and Ellie's a liar. And that, to me, echoed back to in the first season when Ellie's kidnapped by the cannibals. The head cannibal dude says to her, like you are a violent person. Like, it's not just that you do, like, you are a violent person. And I remember that being a line that they added specifically, like that was different from the game that they added.
Interesting.
And so it is interesting that there are these two instances now where people are saying you are a this, Ellie is a thing. And I'm curious to see, I think it's just an interesting framing of like how we're supposed to be thinking about Ellie. And because we are a little bit on the outside, people say similar things about Joel too. Anyway, it's just interesting that there are these characters kind of making declarative statements about what this person is, that are creating this thematic question of, is that true? But that people aren't asking it, they're saying it, is just interesting choice from a writing standpoint.
Yeah, and I think there is the interesting thing of, you can, if you're, so use Harry Potter as a quick example. If you're making the first Harry Potter movie and 3 books have been written, you don't know what books 4 through 7 are yet. But if you're making the 4th or 5th movie, you know where the story's going, so you can choose what to point at and what to focus on and what to draw attention to and what to spend more time with and less. And I do feel like The Last of Us season 1 was made in a post Last of Us Part 2 game world, right? So we can say we know where we want people to, how we want people to feel about Ellie in season 2 and 3, so we can kind of plant some of those seeds in this one. And then another thing I wanted to say real quick, if we at any time in the near future talk about what television is and what episodes are of things, we've talked about a little bit about how an episode can be kind of a standalone thing, or an episode can be just a piece of a bigger, like, 10-hour movie that you're watching. And I think something you said, Trisha, resonated, which is the first season is very like, here's this episode, here are these characters who are introduced at the beginning, and then they're gone at the end, and then that's kind of our little story for this week, and then we're going to move on to the next one. And then I'm just thinking about the things that I know about the second game, and I'm like, I wonder if we are going to get into more of a several episodes feel like one big story being told over a couple of episodes, or if we are going to get more of that focus thing. And I think that'll be interesting to talk about the rest of this season and probably next season, to kind of feel we have those little questions right now of like, this thing was kind of set up, but I don't know if it means something else. I don't know if as opposed to like, this thing was set up and then it went here and then it paid off. And now we're moving on to next week. Right. So I think it'll be interesting to see if this season feels dramatically different in that way than the first season did. And then the last thing I'll say is, did you guys see the opening credits? There's only one person now instead of two.
Yeah, there's two little tendrils.
Yeah.
Nice.
And just really super quickly, in our conversation that we had about The Last of Us season 1 that we recorded recently, we spent a good chunk of that talking about the theme of violence and its relationship with like our humanity, right? And how violence erodes our humanity. And I really love that this season is being set up to even more textually deal with that, right? Like the only way for the revenge to be expressed is violently. What does violence do to your soul? And I love that this episode in particular spent a decent amount of time raising that question even more clearly in the text in a way that the first season wasn't really able to. Like, it was in there because we were seeing a lot of violence on screen, but actually starting to talk about what it does to the inner life and the humanity of the person that enacts the violence. I think it's so lovely, and lovely is maybe not quite the word, but like a relief to me. Like, I feel like I feel like the show is deepening its exploration of that in a way that I think is necessary for me to continue connecting with it. Mm-hmm. And so I love that this episode seems to be pointing at like, hey, we're going to talk more about this in depth as we continue, because this really is about violence. And really this is a battle for Ellie's soul. In a way that Joel truly couldn't be saved, right? But Ellie maybe can be. And I'm so curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah. And I'm also glad you mentioned that episode, because that's a perfect segue to my little wrap up here. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our episodes discussing The Last of Us Season 2, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. All these episodes are also available over on the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. We're releasing them to even our free tier of patrons, so you don't have to be a paid subscriber to get these. But if you do want to support us on Patreon, our $2 and up tier patrons get the episode that Trisha just mentioned. So we recorded a season 1 sort of discussion, reflection episode a few nights ago that should be released by the time you're listening. No, that's not true. It might not be released by the time you're hearing. Shortly after.
Like a day after.
Right. Yes. So that episode about season 1 of The Last of Us will be available to all of our $2 and up patrons. And then a reminder that at the end of this season, we're going to do some kind of similar season 2 wrap up, recap, discussion, reflection thing that'll be cool once we figure out exactly what it'll be. And I think we'll know when we get there what it needs to be. And that will be available to our $5 and up patrons. So keep watching on YouTube, like and subscribe, head over to the Beyond Screenplay Patreon and support the show, help us make more episodes and get some cool stuff along the way. For now, I'm Michael Tucker, and I'm joined today by Trisha Wren, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros, and we will see you next week for episode 4, which again, we don't have the title of, but episode 4 of season 2 of The Last.
Seattle! Exclamation point.
Seattle! The little ta-da emoji.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.